The knock came 4 years to the day after my mother told me. I was an embarrassment to the family name. Now she stood on my porch in the rain, my father beside her, both smaller than I remembered, shrunken, apologetic, clutching a fruit basket like an offering to a god they'd once mocked. "We saw the article," my mother said. "We're so proud of you." Proud. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. I remembered the Thanksgiving they'd stood me up in front of relatives and called me a failure for walking away from law school to build something they didn't understand. I remembered the silence that followed, the group chats. I was quietly removed from the family photos where I'd been cropped out. I smiled now, the way I'd learned to smile in boardrooms. "Come in," I said. "Let's talk." They had no idea what waited inside. My name is Elena Marsh, and I was the middle child, the one nobody worried about because I never made noise. My older brother David was the golden boy, Ivy League, corner office, framed diplomas on the wall. My younger sister Claire was the baby, forgiven for everything, expected of nothing. I was the one in between, the one who did the dishes without being asked and got a nod instead of a thank you. I noticed early that love in my family was a currency, and I was always underpaid. When I brought home a report card of A's, my father asked why it wasn't straight A's. When David brought home B's, he got pizza. I stopped bringing things home to show them. By 19, I'd learned the quiet math of my own worth. If no one was going to notice me, I would build something too large to ignore. Not for revenge, not yet. Just for air, just to breathe somewhere. I wasn't measured against a brother who never had to try. I didn't know then that leaving quietly would be the most defiant thing I ever did. I only knew I was tired of being the family's afterthought. The dinner where it broke happened on a Sunday in March. I'd just signed the lease on my first office, 400 square feet above. A dry cleaner, but mine. I brought it up carefully, the way you test ice before stepping on it. My father didn't look up from his plate. "So you're not going back to finish your degree, I'd say." "I'm building something, Dad." "Building what exactly?" He set his fork down with a precision that felt rehearsed. "A hobby." My mother filled the silence the way she always did. "Not with defense, but with damage control. What your father means is, we just want you to be stable, sweetheart." Like David. David didn't even look up. He didn't have to. His silence was its own kind of verdict. Claire caught my eye across the table for half a second. Something like sympathy, then looked back, down at her phone. Nobody raised their voice. That was the worst part. It was all so calm, so reasonable, so certain. Like they'd already had this conversation without me, somewhere I wasn't invited, and arrived at a verdict before I'd said a word. I smiled, said, "Excuse me," and went to the bathroom to breathe. They never saw me cry. I made sure of that. The turning point wasn't dramatic. There was no slammed door, no speech, no scene. It happened in a parking lot, 3 weeks after that dinner. Sitting alone in my car, with the engine off and the rain starting to streak the windshield, I'd just gotten the call that my first big client, a regional distributor twice the size of anything I thought I could land, wanted to sign. It should have been the happiest moment of my year. Instead, my first instinct was to call my mother. I actually dialed, got as far as the second ring before I hung up. And in that silence, I understood something I'd been avoiding for years. I wasn't waiting for their approval anymore because I needed it. I was waiting out of habit. The way you flinch at a sound long after the "danger's gone." That was the moment. I stopped performing my worth for people who'd already decided not to see it. I didn't need a confrontation. I didn't need to prove anything to them at that table ever again. I just needed to build, quietly, and let the distance between who they thought I was and who I actually became do the talking. I turned the key, drove home, never looked back. That was the last ordinary day of my old life. I didn't plan revenge. I planned distance and let success be the byproduct. The first thing I did was legal. I trademarked the company name before telling a single family member it existed. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Priya, who'd once told me sentiment has no place in a cap table, and helped me structure the business so no one could ever claim a stake in it. Not through blood, not through guilt, not through some future reconciliation, where someone assumed access came with an apology. I built quietly. No press releases with my face in them. No hometown local girl does good headlines. I let the company's name grow louder than mine. I also did something smaller, almost petty in its precision. I stopped correcting people who assumed I still worked some anonymous desk job. Let them believe it. Let David keep believing he was the only sibling worth mentioning at holidays. I no longer attended. Every contract I signed, every hire I made, Every zero added to evaluation. I treated it like laying brick. Not for them, for the version of me that used to apologize for existing at that dinner table. By the third year, my name meant something in rooms my family had never been invited into. They just didn't know it yet. The article came out on a Tuesday. Not tabloid, not viral, just a respected industry profile. Al Namash, the founder who built a 40-matter company without anyone noticing. No mention of family. I'd made sure of that in the interview. Some silences are deliberate. That one was mine to keep. 3 days later, my mother called for the first time in 4 years. I let it go to voicemail. Then came the porch, the fruit basket, the rain. I let them in. Coffee, not wine. I wanted them sober for this. My father cleared his throat first. We should have supported you. You should have, I agreed, and said nothing else. Because agreement isn't the same as forgiveness. And I didn't owe them the difference. I didn't yell. I didn't list grievances. I simply set my laptop on the table and turned it toward them. The cap table. The acquisition offers. The office that now took up an entire floor. Not 400 square feet above a dry cleaner. My mother's hand went to her mouth. My father went very quiet. The same quiet he'd used against me at that dinner table. Except now it meant something else entirely. We're proud of you, she said again. I know, I said. I stopped needing that a long time ago. My father tried to recover the room the way he always had. With logic, with reason, with the tone of a man used to having the last word. We just want to be part of this, part of your life. You can be, I said, but not part of the company. That's not up for discussion. Something shifted in his face. Not anger, something closer to recognition. He'd raised me to negotiate hard. He just never expected me to use it on him. Claire texted me that night. I always knew you'd do something big. I'm sorry I never said it out loud. I believed her more than I believed my parents, mostly because she asked for nothing in return. David didn't reach out for another 2 months. When he finally did, it was a LinkedIn message. Professional and careful, congratulating me on the acquisition news. I read it twice looking for the old condescension. It wasn't there. Maybe he'd finally run out of places to put it. My mother started asking about the business at every call now. Not out of pride exactly, but a kind of hunger to be included in something she'd once dismissed as a hobby. I answered her questions. I just never let her back into the parts that mattered. Some doors you leave open an inch. Not for them, for you. I used to think revenge would feel like winning. Standing there with my laptop open on that table, watching my parents' faces rearrange themselves around a version of me they'd never bothered to imagine, I expected triumph. What I felt instead was quieter, something closer to relief. I didn't destroy them. I didn't need to. I just stopped shrinking, and the space I used to occupy at that dinner table, the space of the disappointing one, the afterthought, simply closed over, the way water closes over a stone. These days, my company takes up 3 floors and 40 employees who've never heard the word hobby used against me. I still see my family, sparingly, on my terms, at my table now, where I decide what gets served and what gets left in the kitchen. I've stopped waiting for an apology that matches the size of what I lost. Some things don't get repaid. They just get outgrown. Sometimes my mother asks if I've forgiven them. I tell her the truth. I've moved past needing to answer that question, because the real revenge was never the article, or the acquisition, or the look on my father's face. It was becoming someone their silence could no longer touch. That was mine, and no one gets to take it from me twice.